All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going deep on the Clairemont killer Cleophus Prince Jr. Pretty fascinating case, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It's disturbing too, of course.
Right.
So we'll get into the details of what he did, what made his crime so unique, and then kind of see how the police finally tracked him down.
Right.
So if you're into true crime or you're interested in psychology or how criminal justice works, this one's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think it challenges a lot of people's ideas about what a serial killer is, how they act. At first glance, his crimes seem random, kind of sloppy even, but when you really look closer, it's almost like that helped him hide in plain sight.
So let's start with Cleophus Prince Jr. before he was the Claremont killer. I mean, just who was this guy?
Well, he was born in '67, and he was in the Navy. He was a mechanic.
So you'd think there's some discipline there, right? I mean, some structure to his life.
Well, yeah, but things get a little murky. There's this incident in '89 where he's court-martialed for larceny and then gets discharged.
Mhm.
So maybe that was a turning point, Could have led to resentment, a sense of injustice, or maybe it even taught him how to manipulate systems.
Yeah, play by the rules, but bend them just enough.
Right, exactly.
Makes you wonder if that's what shaped his criminal behavior later on.
It's certainly possible.
So after he's out of the Navy, he ends up in San Diego County in California. And then between January and September of 1990, things take a very dark turn. A series of murders start happening in Claremont Mesa and University City neighborhoods.
6 women were killed in those 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, just the brutality of the crimes, how random they seemed, really shoved the community. And I guess that's where this idea of Prince being a disorganized opportunist come from.
Right, from the crime scenes, yeah.
What does that actually mean, though, like disorganized opportunist?
So it's like a specific type of criminal profile. In Prince's case, it suggested that his attacks weren't meticulously planned. He wasn't stalking victims for weeks, setting up elaborate traps. It seems like he was more impulsive, taking advantage of opportunities as they came up, targeting women at home during the day, often going in through unlocked doors or windows.
It's like a terrifying contrast, right? Like the ordinariness of it all, but then the horrific violence.
Yeah, and a lot of his victims were surprised in vulnerable moments, like right after a shower, and he'd use knives from their own kitchens, which really fed into this idea that he was impulsive, not planning ahead.
So the police, they were looking for a criminal mastermind, like the classic serial killer profile, right?
Yeah, but Prince didn't fit that mold at all. His crimes seemed sloppy, almost random, and that's what made him so hard to catch. He could just blend into everyday life.
So the victims, their stories are so important to remember. We have Tiffany Paige Schultz, she was only 20, Mary Weinhold, 21, Holly Suzanne Tarr, just 18, Alyssa Naomi Keller, 38.
Right.
Then Pamela Gail Clark, 42, and her daughter, Amber Clark, only 18. They were killed together. That must have been just devastating for the community.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the nature of the crimes. It was where they happened, too. All in these very normal neighborhoods, Claremont Mesa and University City, people started feeling like a predator was just lurking on their streets. Like the everydayness of the setting just amplified the horror.
Before we go any further, is there anything about this early part of the case that really jumps out at you?
The thing that's always fascinated me is how this idea of Prince being a disorganized opportunist might have actually helped him. It's like he used being ordinary as a weapon. He was a ghost, a shadow in the routine of the community, and that let him go on killing undetected for so long.
That's a chilling thought, that evil doesn't always have to be flashy or complex to be dangerous.
Exactly. And this case really exposes the limits of profiling. Sometimes it can blind you to possibilities.
Right, so the police had a huge challenge ahead of them, a string of brutal murders, a terrified public, and a suspect who just seemed to disappear after each crime. What did they even do? How did they start to approach this?
They launched this massive manhunt. I mean, the biggest in San Diego history. They were really relying on witness statements, forensic evidence, anything to find a pattern, something that would lead them to this killer.
Did they have anything?
Well, there was this one witness who thought they saw the killer running from a crime scene. So they made a composite sketch.
And it helped?
Not really. It was just too vague to narrow down the suspects. But then, during the investigation of Pamela Clark's murder, the police discovered she went to this fitness club in Miramar.
Okay.
Which, wasn't that far from where Prince's ex-girlfriend lived.
So that's where that theory about him stalking some of his victims came from.
Exactly. That little detail kind of threw a wrench in the disorganized label, right? Suddenly there's this possibility of premeditation, planning ahead, which, highlights how limiting a profile can be, especially early on.
Like the pieces of the puzzle weren't all fitting together, right? On one hand, you have the seemingly random attacks, unlocked doors, kitchen knives, but then you have this hint of stalking, something more calculated.
And then there's the fact that Prince was giving away stuff he'd stolen from his victims, like to his girlfriend.
Really?
Yeah, we know from court documents that he gave his girlfriend one of Holly Tarr's rings for Christmas.
What was he thinking? Was it just a mistake, or was it something more sinister?
It's hard to say, but it's a question that's really fascinated criminologists. Was he taunting the police? Did he get some twisted thrill out of knowing he was outsmarting them? Or was he just completely callous, trying to erase any trace of what he'd done?
It's disturbing to think about this guy who seemed so normal was capable of such horrifying acts, and he knew how to blend in to appear harmless.
Exactly, and that's what makes this case so compelling and so scary. But it will see his facade starts to crumble pretty soon. Not because of some amazing police work or technology, but through a series of almost random events. That's what really changes everything in this investigation. So it's February 1991. Prince is about to do something that's going to completely unravel everything. He tries to break into this woman's house in Scripps Ranch. And what seems like a small thing actually ends up changing the whole investigation.
You said before it wasn't like the police had this brilliant plan or anything. Sounds like it was almost pure luck, or fate even. So what happened?
Well, the woman was home, just going about her day when she heard something weird at the front door. And she was smart. She trusted her gut that something wasn't right.
So she didn't just ignore it. What would she do?
She got out of there fast, went out the back and called a neighbor for help.
And that neighbor could have just blown her off, but he didn't. He actually went to confront Prince, who was still hanging around the house. That's huge, that decision to step in. I mean, sometimes the smallest acts of bravery can have these massive consequences, you know?
Totally. And in this case, that's what brings Prince down, this totally normal guy just doing the right thing. And get this, when the neighbor confronts him, Prince tries to make up this excuse, says he's looking for a friend who went inside. But the neighbor, thankfully, didn't buy it.
Makes you wonder how many times he used that same line before.
Right. Chilling to think about. And what's even more amazing, the neighbor wrote down Prince's license plate number. And then later on, he picked Prince out of a photo lineup.
Wow, talk about a game changer. Just shows you how important it is to pay attention, be aware of your surroundings. Regular people can really help solve crimes.
For sure. So the police now, they've got the license plate. They put out an alert to all the fitness clubs in the area, remembering that whole theory about Prince stalking victims from those places.
So did they catch him at a gym?
Yep, February 4th, 1991. Right in the parking lot of the health club. It's like the places he used to find his victims ended up being his downfall. And here's the crucial part. Once they had him, Prince agreed to give blood and saliva samples.
Did those samples prove what the police suspected?
Those samples were the key. The DNA matched perfectly to Jane Weinhold, one of the Clairemont victims. Finally, they had solid proof that connected Prince to the murders.
It was the missing link they needed. So how did things change after that?
Everything clicked into place. The DNA, the pattern of the crimes, where they happened, the witness statements, all of it pointed to Prince as the Clairemont Killer. It was like solving a giant puzzle.
So it went to trial. What was the prosecution's strategy?
The judge reviewed all the evidence and in March of '92 ordered Prince to stand trial. The prosecution, they focused on how consistent Prince's crimes were. Remember, always women, always at home during the day, unlocked doors, kitchen knives. It was chilling how similar they all were. And then you add the DNA match, and it's a very strong case against him.
Did the defense have anything to fight back with?
They tried to argue that he should be cleared of 3 of the murders because there wasn't direct evidence. They said the DNA only tied him to Jane Weinhold, not enough to prove he killed the others.
Sounds like they were going for reasonable doubt, trying to poke holes in the prosecution's case. Did it work?
The judge didn't buy it. The way the murders were carried out, it was just too similar to ignore. Even without DNA for every victim, the pattern was obvious.
So what was the verdict?
July 1993, the jury found him guilty, 6 counts of first-degree murder and 21 other felonies. Then they had to decide on the sentence. On November 5th, 1993, they came back with a decision. Death Cleophus Prince Jr., this seemingly average mechanic who terrorized San Diego, was going to death row at San Quentin.
It's strange, isn't it? This guy who was so good at blending in, at being ordinary, now he's facing the ultimate punishment, completely cut off from the society he was hiding in. Proof that justice, even if it takes time, can be powerful.
Yeah, it's a moment of truth, like everything led up to this. But even with the conviction, the sentence, there's still this unsettling feeling. Because even with the answers we have, there are still so many questions left, things about this case that are both fascinating and terrifying.
Prince is convicted. He's sentenced to death, off to San Quentin. You'd think that'd be it, right? Case closed. Some sense of closure for everyone involved.
Yeah, you'd think so. But it wasn't quite over legally. Prince appealed his sentence.
Oh, okay. What was his argument?
He claimed all the media attention surrounding the case had biased the jury, said he couldn't get a fair trial. And, given how huge this investigation was, how much the public was following the Clairemont Killer, it's not a crazy argument.
It was definitely a high-profile case. I mean, the news was full of it, all the details of the murders, the victims, then Prince himself. Do you think that could have actually swayed the jury?
It's possible, right? All that information, the speculation, people's opinions flying around, it could definitely create some bias, even if they weren't aware of it.
So what happened with the appeal?
Well, in 2007, the California Supreme Court denied it. They acknowledged that there was a ton of media coverage, but said that didn't automatically mean an unfair trial. They decided the evidence, along with the judge's instructions to the jury, were enough to ensure a fair verdict.
So Prince is still on death row today, and that brings us back to this question that's been bugging me. How did someone who seems so disorganized, so opportunistic, manage to avoid getting caught for so long?
It's a puzzle that still fascinates people, criminologists, psychologists, everyone. How can someone who's seemingly acting on impulse, no real planning, commit these awful crimes and stay under the radar for months?
You talked about weaponized ordinariness before. What did you mean by that?
One theory is that Prince's ability to blend in, to be just another face in the crowd, that was his biggest advantage. He didn't look or act like the stereotypical serial killer. Not flashy, not charismatic, not some mastermind, just an average guy, someone you wouldn't even notice. And that let him move around undetected, like a ghost.
It's terrifying to think that someone capable of such violence could be hiding in plain sight, right there in everyday life. Makes you question everything you think you know about predators.
Absolutely, and it shows how profiling can be flawed. You get too focused on a specific type, you might miss the ones who don't fit the mold, like Prince.
And then there's the role of pure chance in all this. If that woman in Scripps Ranch hadn't been home, if that neighbor had gotten involved, who knows how long Prince would have kept going.
It's a heavy thought, isn't it? The smallest things, the choices we make, they can have these huge ripple effects that we never see coming. In this case, those actions stopped a serial killer, probably saved lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Clairemont Killer, what are the big things you want our listener to take away from all this?
I think the biggest lesson is that evil can be really deceptive. It doesn't always look how we expect. Sometimes it's hiding right in front of us, disguised as something normal, something we don't even question. It's a reminder to be aware, trust your gut, and never underestimate the power of even the smallest actions.
This deep dive has taken us to some dark places, right? We've seen the brutality of the crimes, the twists and turns of the investigation, the weight of the trial, and all those unanswered questions that stick with you. But more than that, it's made us challenge our own assumptions, think critically about the world around us, and to remember that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who seem the least threatening.
Yeah. And as we finish up, I want to leave you with this. How can we, as individuals and as a society, be more aware of the subtle signs of danger? How can we be more vigilant, not out of fear, but out of a sense of responsibility to protect ourselves and each other? The answers aren't easy. They're not about simple solutions or profiles. It's about being willing to face the complexity of human nature, to confront the darkness, and to never stop searching for justice and understanding.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Clairemont Killer. We hope it's been insightful, maybe made you think, and yeah, maybe even a little bit unsettled. Be sure to check out the show notes for more info on this case and other stuff we've talked about. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.